In today's video we'll be looking at the development and history of the short-lived Guinit helmet, a piece of gear with an interesting backstory and of which very little is known. Following a successful introduction during the First World War, it wasn't long before nations all over the globe began issuing steel helmets, such as the Stahlhelm and Brodie, as a standard and vital component of a soldier's loadout. One nation, however, with its limited industrial capacity, developed an innovative solution to ensure its military would not enter the next conflict unequipped. In the early 20th century, the Philippines was considered by many the pearl of America's young empire. Newly acquired from the Spanish in 1898, by 1935 the country had entered a transitional period towards independence, guided by the US, with plans to release a free democratic republic by 1946. Included in these plans was the National Defense Act, which called for the creation of a Philippine army to defend the republic against neighboring imperial powers, perhaps most imminently the Empire of Japan. While the Philippine Scouts under US command received Brodie helmets and automatic weapons, the National Army was left largely to procure its own equipment. Then President Quezon also decided that domestic production would make the army self-reliant and create jobs in manufacturing. Components of the new 1936 uniform were produced all over the country and included unique variations for both the established constabulary and the newly formed Army, Air Force and Naval units. The Philippine Constabulary, responsible for internal security since 1911, have previously worn an assortment of traditional tribal headgear, campaign hats and peaked caps from the Spanish period. The adoption of new uniforms sought to standardize but also modernize the nation's forces. Steel helmets offered the best protection, however, the Philippines lacked the large steel industry and pressing technology of the West, and a design was therefore proposed using locally sourced materials. The Guinit or Gunnit sun helmet was effectively a pith helmet, similar in design to those used by the European powers in the colonies, which had originally been inspired by the Filipino salakot. Sun helmets made from woven or pressed plant fibers were lightweight, broad-rimmed to shield the neck and face from the blistering tropical sun, and were well ventilated. They offered little protection against shrapnel, however in the fighting against tribes and poorly armed rebels proved more than adequate. Widely available coconut husk fibre was chosen as the base material for the Guinit, making them extremely cost-effective for troops required to purchase their own uniforms. They were likely mass-produced by press forming before being coated with a lacquer to increase durability, and then painted in khaki to match the rest of the kit. Similarly to the British Wolseley helmet, a thin cloth band or puggaree was wrapped around the dome of the helmet to denote rank and affiliation, blue for the army and red for the constabulary. A spiked version was also used for ceremonial purposes. By 1939 the Guinit appears to have been standard issue amongst all units of the army and reserves, totaling roughly 120,000 men. When the Japanese invaded in December 1941, the Filipino forces suffered heavy losses against better trained and equipped imperial troops. It is unknown how the Guinit helmet performed in combat, and very few records remain depicting or referencing them after the country's surrender in 1942. Many units retreated inland to continue a guerrilla war for the remainder of the occupation, adopting civilian fedoras and straw hats. It could be assumed that most Guinits were discarded as troops were interned en masse during the Bataan Death March, although Filipino POWs can still be seen wearing them after the surrender. Due to the base material, the helmets left in the jungle or along the march likely rotted away with exposure to the elements. As a result, very few examples remain today outside of museums. One organisation that seems to have held on to theirs in considerable numbers after the surrender was the Bureau of Constabulary, the collaborationist gendarmerie set up during the occupation, who are depicted in many Japanese propaganda posters wearing guinits and original constabulary uniforms. If these representations are to be believed, then the guinit was likely used until 1944 or 45 when American forces liberated Manila and the Puppet Republic under President Laurel was dissolved. As more provinces were liberated, guerrilla units were reformed into brigades and issued modern US equipment, including the new steel M1 helmets, which the Philippine forces would adopt following the war and use until present day. If you're interested in the history of the Philippines during World War II, then I would highly recommend reading Mike Guardia's American Guerrilla, which covers the guerrilla campaign in depth from 1942 to 45. Or better yet, get it for free on Audible by clicking the link in the description. By signing up to Audible, you'll get one free audiobook of your choice and the opportunity to listen to thousands more. Listen at home or on the move with Audible. Thank you for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe to see more videos like this on Humfish.